A lot of growers come to us when there's a crisis, which means they're willing to change. And that's unfortunate that it has to wait until that happens. But we have also had pretty good success getting IPM adopted in certain crops or in certain regions where there is no crisis. And the way we've done that is by on-farm demonstrations. So we actually take a crop through using an IPM approach versus what the grower would normally do or what their advisors would normally suggest. And so at the end of it, the crop has been produced, the pests have been managed in a different way, and everyone has seen that. And so we do that in commercial crops, so they're real life situations. And at the end of it, seeing is believing, and that's the most effective way, I believe, to implement IPM. For anyone that is interested in trialling an IPM approach, we usually suggest that instead of just trying to switch over the whole farm on day one, that they look at trialling it on a planting or on a paddock. So it depends on what they're growing, of course. You know, if it's an arable crop, maybe one crop, one whole paddock or half a paddock. If it's a vegetable crop, maybe start off when they're planting a new paddock with the first planting. Give it a try, and then hopefully people see it's not that hard and it does work. Then they'll try it on a second planting or a second paddock, and before too long, most people will try it on their whole farm. That's our experience. One of the most important things, and it might seem obvious, is the first step is to take out the broad spectrum insecticides. You know, unless you do that, there's no point doing anything else. So if that's done, encouraging beneficials, you want to make the habitat in the crop as conducive as possible for the beneficial, so providing food, habitat and shelter. And the food is the pest, most commonly. And in natural systems, there's always a lag between the arrival of the pest and the arrival of the beneficial. And so that's usually the place where a pesticide application is required, just to lower the pest population until the beneficials increase. So one way you can get around that, if people are willing to, is to put a sacrificial planting in at the start of the crop cycle so that the pest arrives onto plants that are not intended to be harvested. Then the beneficials arrive. So this could be just one row on the edge of a crop, but then when the full crop is planted, all the beneficials are already there and there's no lag. Another cultural control to encourage beneficial species is to provide a nectar source, a pollen and nectar source, and that gives food for beneficial species. So this could be as simple as flowering plants on the fence line, and it can make a massive difference to how long things like parasitic wasps and hoverflies can live. So if a parasitic wasp, for example, that parasitises diamondback moth, if the females only get water and no pollen or nectar, as in sugar source, they might live for 2 days. But if they get a nectar source, they might live for 2 to 3 months. So it's not just an incremental change, it's a massive change. So things that might seem really simple can actually have a big impact on beneficial species and how much impact they have. As well as trialling IPM just on one paddock, when a grower starts to do that, they're very worried usually, and it's very different to what they normally have done. And so, for example, we worked with an onion grower very many years ago who was used to putting an insecticide on probably weekly. To get him to change, we'd go out into the paddock together, we'd look at the thrips, and I would ask him every week, if you didn't spray this week, would it be a disaster? Could you wait until next week? And I was visiting the crop weekly. In the first week, he said, no, I can wait till next week. And then in the second week, I asked the same question. He could hold off, and he was horrified that by the end of the season, he'd gone through the entire season and hadn't sprayed an insecticide at all. And so once he saw that, He understood the process. So if people are interested in trialling an IPM approach, the first thing I would do would be to look at the set of pests to be controlled, and then look at taking out the broad spectrum insecticides that would be disruptive and using what selective insecticides are available and registered on those crops. After that, look at what cultural controls might be available to improve the life of beneficials and make sure they're not encouraging pests, and look for information on how to identify the different life stages of the beneficial species.